This is truly the scariest, most horrible thing that has ever happened to me. I have never been so petrified in my life. To this day, I still do not know who this man was, what he was trying to do, or if he still is where I saw him. I'm sorry for how long the geographical description is. I just want everyone to understand how secluded I was when this happened, and how badly it could have ended if it wasn't for my parents. I was back home for summer for the first time in a year after starting university. Our home was, and still is, just outside of a small town with forests all around. There was also a small man-made lake, which was diverged from a river that ran for miles through the forest and ramified into a few streams east of the lake. Near my home, there was a small grassy path that led to the river following a stream. It was a long walk, but one that I used to go on often as a child. I knew the forest there well. I knew where I could cut through dense trees to meet the stream. The walk that I would always go on led me off the path which turned northwest slowly, so away from the stream, and then took a sharp turn to the west. After a few miles walk, at which point the stream was hidden quite deep into the forest. I would continue to walk north and follow the stream through the forest to get to the river, and then follow the river west to get to the lake. It's easy to get lost in this forest because the terrain isn't just a slope down to the water. It goes up and down, and you end up completely surrounded by trees. I had spent many days wandering around there alone, or with my dad over the span of 18 years. I never saw anybody else in that forest. I went there twice that summer, both times alone-ish. The first time, I left in the morning. I walked along the path away from the stream to the sharp bend and then cut back into the forest. I reached the stream after an hour or so. As I was running my hands in the water, I heard a bell from far away, coming from the north. Something was making a bell ring fervently and periodically, which I found strange. I listened well, wondered if it was a lost hunting dog, and started moving towards the sound. I bloody know that I'd be the first person to die, but I was heading north anyway, so what the heck. I realized that it couldn't have been an animal. I could tell that the bell was too heavy, because of how clear the sound was to be on a collar. I kept moving, and the bell was moving away from me. It stopped completely after 5 minutes. The stream wasn't big enough or strong enough to carry a bell. That could have been enclosed in a tin or something, and the river was far too still. I thought of everything, but nothing explained the sound, apart from one obvious thing, which I just didn't feel comfortable with for some reason. I knew that it had to have been a person. I stopped thinking about it and just walked on normally. Until I found a badger, a bloomin' dead one, carefully decapitated. It had obviously been done with a knife. It was fairly fresh, the body was still limp, and there wasn't too much of a smell coming from it. The wound was full of maggots, but I knew that happened soon after exposure. The sound of the bell had been following the stream, and so had I. So the badger was put there, maybe attacked there, at least decapitated, while I was walking that way, I suppose, but I don't really know. Nothing else happened that day. 1 week later, I went back for the second time that summer, and the last time ever. I left home at around 6 p.m. Yeah, I know. I made it to the stream, and then walked to the river in an hour, and then decided to go back the way that I came because it was getting late and it was raining quite heavily. The sun set around 9 p.m. I was walking as fast as I could. The sound of the rain in the trees was surreal and loud. I was somewhat trotting with my head down for a while through the clearest and most open part of the forest when I bumped into something heavy. The smell was sickly. It was the decomposing body of the badger, with his head strung to his front paws. That area looked a bit like a ham because of the way that it was tied, just swinging from a tree, like an almost literal load of bullocks. It was his putrid bag of stench, wet and dripping green liquid. I started gagging. I had some sort of mucus-textured fluid in my hair. It was repulsive. At first, I just stared at it, slightly gobsmacked, and then I started fidgeting violently because I felt like I was drenched in its juices. I was soaking from the rain. My senses became confused. It felt like a bucket of cold ice water had been thrown over me when I realized that I had walked the same way to get to the river. So someone had strung the body up after I had passed it on their way there. Someone knew I would see it. So, was someone watching me and running around the forest, with the faint sounds of branches breaking around me, not animals? I looked around and started jogging. I was half running, half walking away from the stream back towards the path for a while, when I heard the bell again. I proceeded to call my dad while running. I told him to meet me on the path where it sharply turns west. It was the closest part of the path to me, to go as fast as he could, and that someone was in the forest. I can't explain the feeling I had. It was like I had just crapped on my intestines and stomach. I literally felt the hairs on my neck raise despite being soaked. It was dark. I jogged as fast as I could. I was panicking because the path was still a bit far away, just too far to feel safe. It was still raining. Every single sound was muffled. I felt like everything was further away than ever before. The bell went on for way longer than the last time, on and off. I felt like it was surrounding me at one point. The fear combined with my compromised hearing and the fact that I couldn't flip and breathe properly was making me slightly lose my sense of direction. I was automatically heading southwest, but I wasn't really sure what I was even doing. I was breathing like a freaking horse, coughing my lungs up, kind of crying out loud like a toddler does, tripping over leaves and twigs like an idiot. I stayed on the phone with my mom, who was on her way with my dad. I kept hearing sounds, but I wasn't sure what they were. My mom was screaming on the phone at the same time that they were on the path, that I needed to run, that my dad had gotten out and was heading east from the path bend. I was terrified, so I went into survival mode. I was doing the half-running, half-speed walking thing again because I was out of breath. And then, I heard branches break. Clear footsteps for the first time from down in the forest, and the bell ringing louder. I didn't want to, but I looked over my shoulder. And that's when I saw what was in the forest with me. A tall figure creeping in my direction at the very end of the clearing, ringing his bell slowly in front of his stomach. I could tell that he was staring straight at me. Now, I don't know if I had a hidden secret sprinting ability, or instinctual adrenaline-induced superhuman powers, but when I tell you that I ran for my life, I frickin' didn't look back once. I screamed as much as I could. I lied. I'm on the phone with the police. They are on the path. Dad, I can see you, I'm here. I wanted to yell, Dad, please, where are you? But I kept that to myself. I felt like something awful was going to happen. I felt like the man was right behind me. I kept telling myself not to look back. I was gasping and wheezing, crying so hard and screaming for my dad. I felt shivers on my neck, and then switched off and I just ran. I even dropped my bag and only realized that I didn't have any more when I was in the car. I felt like my phone was my only way home. Things no longer felt real. It was like my legs were moving by themselves. I didn't know if the man was still following me. I could only hear my heart beating in my ears and the bell. I finally heard my dad shout my name, and I knew that he was coming my way, and that he could see me because of the intonation in his voice. I pretty much lunged myself at him when we got to each other. My dad heard the bell too. My mom could hear it on the phone. She was waiting with the car, ready to leave fast. We went directly to the police station, and I got medical attention soon after. My dad burst into tears in the car, said that he could hear the bell, and thought that he wouldn't be able to see me. Asked what if I didn't have my phone, what if he hadn't picked up. They were almost as terrified as me because they witnessed everything through the call. They could hear me trying to run, and they could hear the danger, but they just couldn't see it. The police couldn't really do much. They searched the area and the only thing they found was a folded t-shirt placed under a rock. I didn't really question that at the time. And my bag was not recovered. They said it was probably some homeless man living in the forest, but failed to realize what could have happened if my dad didn't know that part of the forest like I did, and where to find me. I'm not blaming anyone. The entire thing was my fault. There are just so many what-ifs. I want to believe it was just someone who decided to live in the woods and hunt or something. Maybe they were a bit mentally unstable and they felt angry that I came into their territory. But what if it was more insidious? The way that he moved towards me was abnormal. It was perverse because of how slowly he was ringing the bell. It's like he had me trapped. I didn't see any more detail. I just ran. To this day, I can't bloody go anywhere where I'll be alone, and the sound of bells is a real problem. The smell of moss as well. Anyway, my parents and Steve Jobs saved my life. So, go hug yours now and take decapitated badgers and bells as pagan signs that you're unwelcome. I was 18 at the time. One evening, me and my two friends, Mike and Paul, decided to go camping. Well, camping maybe isn't the right word, since we didn't intend to spend the night. Only to chill and have some fun around the campfire for a while. The plan was simple. Head out, build a campfire, drink a few bottles of wine, eat something, and head back home for a good night's sleep. We had met at my house when it was still sunny outside. We got ready and we headed out. Our destination was an old abandoned quarry in the middle of the woods, which was maybe 40 minutes away from my house. Even though the quarry has a tragic and frankly creepy history, it's a popular place for such occasions. When we got there, the sky was already colored red as the sun slowly sank behind the hills. We quickly gathered all the firewood that we could, so we wouldn't have to look for it later. As the darkness fell and absorbed all of our surroundings into impenetrable blackness, we had already managed to get the fire going. We were in a great mood and we were getting ready for our first toast. And that's when we realized that we had made a horrible mistake. We forgot the corkscrew. We were trying to open the wine without it, but we quickly gave up. Because the bottles were quite expensive, and we didn't want to damage them. At this point, it was clear that one of us would have to sacrifice themselves and jog back to retrieve the corkscrew. After a bit of haggling, I volunteered. However, I had two conditions. Firstly, they would give me a hatchet in case something went wrong along the way. And secondly, no pranks when I got back. Mike and Paul agreed without hesitation. They shoved a hatchet into my one hand and a flashlight to the other, and sent me on my way. As I was jogging through the forest, I heard a noise resembling a wild boar. Suddenly, I remembered a warning I received from an older hunter a few days ago. He said that this time of year, boars were getting dangerous, especially at night. I was a bit nervous, but luckily I managed to survive with no harm. I arrived safely to my house, much to my surprise of my mom, who didn't expect me back so early. I explained the whole deal, which she just laughed. I grabbed the corkscrew and was back on my way. Not wanting to experience an unpleasant boar encounter, I chose another, slightly longer path, this time through an open field. After a while, I got to our spot. It was a small clearing, surrounded on one side by massive rocks, maybe 70 meters tall, and on the other side by thick forest. Somewhere in the middle of the clearing was our campfire. When I approached it, I realized that there wasn't anybody, although our backpacks were still on the ground and the fire was burning bright. Great. We specifically agreed that there would be no pranks when I got back. Those guys think that they're funny, I thought to myself. I resignedly sat down near the fire while facing the woods. That's the only place where those two guys could have hidden, I thought. I was really tired and all I could think about was the taste of that exquisite Pinot Noir we had brought with us. I really wasn't in the mood for their games and I was getting quite mad. And that's when I heard a snapping of twigs and rustling of leaves from the edge of the forest, maybe 30 meters from where I was sitting. The sound was rhythmical and it was undoubtedly the sound of somebody walking. I aimed my flashlight to the spot where sounds were coming from. Between the trees, I spotted a tall person wearing a dark hoodie. As I shined my flashlight on him, he stopped walking, turned to me and just kept staring motionlessly. Even though he was directly facing me, I couldn't really see his face. I shouted, "Paul, you fatso! I know you're trying to scare me. We agreed on something, so stop messing around and come out." As I finished, the hooded figure just turned around and walked deeper into the woods. Exactly at that time, my phone started ringing. Hastily, I took it out of my pocket. It was Mike. I took the call and started barking at him. "Really funny, guys. I thought we agreed on something." "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about you trying to mess with me. I clearly saw you, and now you can come out." Mike, as if frozen for a minute. For what seemed like an eternity, all I could hear was his heavy breathing and Paul mumbling something in the background. When he finally snapped back to reality, he just said, "Dude, we're at your house. We heard some footsteps and at first we thought you were just trying to mess with us. But then we got scared and decided to look after you. I forgot the phone at your house, so we couldn't even give you a call. Just get the heck out of there and we'll come back for our stuff together." "BS. That's just another one of your funny pranks and I'm not buying it." "Hold on a second." For a while, all I could hear was some incoherent mumbling. "Hey, what's going on?" asked the voice of my mom coming from the phone. My head suddenly spun and my heart skipped a beat as I realized that they weren't kidding. Suddenly, a freezing wave of fear ran through my body. However, I managed to convince Mom that everything was just fine, and that she didn't need to worry. She gave the phone back to Mike. "Just leave everything and come back. We're heading out now. We'll meet you halfway there." "I'm not going anywhere alone again. You better get your butts here and do it quick. I'm waiting for you." "But..." I hung up. I didn't wish to make any more noise than I already did. I quickly turned off my flashlight and started to back off from the light of the fire. I moved all the way to the huge wall of rocks. I figured that if I had my bag covered by the rocks, I could eliminate one of the possible ways that unwanted visitors could approach me. I was standing there in a complete darkness, trying not to make a sound while tightly clutching my hatchet, which would be for the next half an hour my best friend. I had to constantly convince myself not to curl into a ball in fear. Even my own body started to betray me. As my hearing got worse due to my savagely beating heart, I was trying to calm myself. But then again, in worst case scenario, every little bit of adrenaline would help. After what seemed like an eternity, I spotted 2 weak light beams coming from the forest. I heard Paul shout my name. I'd never been so relieved. I finally ran out from my hiding to greet my 2 friends. For quite some time, we were just standing there, laughing like maniacs from relief. We were even getting a bit cocky, and we thought about staying. After all, there was just one supposedly creep lurking between the trees, and there were 3 of us. It's funny. Just minutes earlier, I was crapping myself with fear, and now I was suddenly full of tough macho thinking, what could possibly happen? In the end, healthy judgments got the better of us and we decided to leave. We packed our things, put out the fire and got out. We took our bottles of wine to enjoy somewhere else. Somewhere where it's nice and brightly lit.